He was the king of late-night TV, but a new tell-all book claims there was a dark side to Johnny Carson.
The gimmick was only there to get people, was a reason for people to come on and make jokes.
Sure.
And, win a cookie or something, and that was it.
Long before social media outrage and instant cancellation, Johnny Carson ruled late night with a smile that disarmed and jokes that cut deep. Night after night, his monologue pushed boundaries that audiences barely noticed at the time. Today, those same punchlines would spark backlash. Rewatching them now feels shocking, hilarious, and revealing all at once. So, what did Carson really say? Why did America laugh? And how different is comedy when every word is judged through a modern lens, today on screen, everywhere? The joke that emptied America's shelves. The great toilet paper. Panic of 1973 is one of the strangest moments in modern American history. And it all started with a joke that went a little too far. On the night of December 19th, 1973, millions of Americans sat in their living rooms watching The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson, the trusted and beloved host, was doing what he did best, making people laugh. During the show, he casually joked that the country was facing a shortage of toilet paper. The comment was brief, lighthearted, and meant to amuse. Carson did not shout, warn, or tell people to panic. He simply tossed it out as a humorous remark and moved on. Yet America didn't simply laugh and move on. The joke hit a nation already on edge, a country simmering with tension and uncertainty. What might have been a passing moment of humor instead sparked unease, leaving a restless public grappling with feelings they couldn't easily shake or ignore. At the time, Americans were living through the oil crisis. Gas was scarce. Long lines formed at fuel stations. Prices were rising, and rationing had become a familiar word. People had recently been told they could not always get what they needed when they needed it. So when Carson mentioned toilet paper, even jokingly, many viewers felt a spark of fear. What if this is another shortage? What if we don't prepare in time? Carson's joke was loosely based on a warning made by a congressman who had raised concerns about possible problems in paper production. It was not a statement of fact, and there was no evidence that toilet paper was running out. Manufacturers had enough supply, and stores were operating normally. Still, once the idea of scarcity entered people's minds, logic took a back seat. The very next day, shoppers across the country began buying more toilet paper than usual. Some grabbed an extra pack, others filled entire carts. The thought was simple: better safe than sorry. No one wanted to be the person stuck without such an essential item. Stores were not prepared for this sudden rush. Toilet paper is bulky and takes up a lot of space, so shops usually restock it gradually. When customers began buying faster than shelves could be refilled, the aisles quickly emptied. Soon, people walked into stores and saw bare shelves where toilet paper used to be. And that sight changed everything. Empty shelves sent a powerful message. The shortage is real. People who had not been worried before now felt alarmed. If the shelves were empty, surely something serious was happening. More shoppers joined the rush, buying whatever they could find. Those who already had enough bought more, just in case things got worse. The media stepped in to report what was happening. Newspapers printed photos of empty aisles. Television news showed worried shoppers and store managers struggling to explain the situation. Ironically, this coverage made the panic spread faster. People who had not watched Johnny Carson or heard the original joke now believed the country was truly running out of toilet paper. Manufacturers and retailers tried to calm the public. They explained that there was no shortage and that production was steady. Johnny Carson himself went back on air to apologize. He clearly stated that his comment had been a joke and that Americans had nothing to fear. But by then, fear had its own momentum. Stores introduced purchase limits, hoping to slow the buying. Instead, the limits made people even more nervous. Why limit sales if there isn't a problem? Gradually, as the days passed and people realized their homes were overflowing with toilet paper, buying slowed down. By early January 1974, shelves began to refill. Life returned to normal, and the panic quietly faded away. In the end, there was never a real toilet paper shortage. Factories kept running. Supply chains stayed intact. What failed was not production, but perception. The Great Toilet Paper Panic of 1973 remains a lasting lesson. It shows how quickly fear can spread, how deeply people trust familiar media voices, and how crowd behavior can turn a harmless joke into a nationwide crisis. Above all, it reminds us that sometimes the most powerful shortages exist only in our minds. Was Johnny Carson sanctioned for the sensitive joke or overlooked? Was he able to learn his lessons? Let's dive further into the details of how personal stories became universal laughter. Confession, chaos, and craft. Some of the most unforgettable, magic-filled moments on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, didn't come from clever wordplay or flashy stunts. They came from the simple, messy truths of being human. The comedians who appeared on Carson's stage didn't shy away from their flaws. Instead, they leaned right into them. They talked openly about failed marriages, awkward family gatherings, strange habits, and choices in life they now wished they could erase. What made these moments so powerful wasn't that the stories were tragic. It was that the pain became playful. Carson and his guests had a rare gift. They could take personal embarrassment and turn it into universal laughter. Take, for instance, a joke about a father-in-law with a pacemaker that somehow controlled a garage door. On paper, it sounds ridiculous, like something lifted straight from a cartoon. But the audience laughed not just because it was absurd. They laughed because underneath the silliness there was truth. They recognized the awkwardness of family quirks, the strange ways our loved ones can surprise or frustrate us. It felt real, even in its exaggeration, and that's why it landed so hard. It reminded everyone watching that life itself is a little weird, sometimes embarrassing, and often uncontrollable. Then there were stories of personal misadventures, like a comedian recounting the terrifying yet hilarious experience of waking up in an unfamiliar place after a night of drinking. The tale worked not simply because it was funny in itself, but because it struck a chord with a shared human fear, losing control. We have all felt that sinking dread when reality slips out of our hands, even if only in small ways. By exposing these moments of vulnerability, the performers invited the audience to laugh not at them, but with them. They made viewers feel seen and connected because the experiences, at their core, were deeply relatable. Johnny Carson understood something most comedians never fully grasped. He instinctively knew that the funniest moments weren't born from putting others down or showing off superiority. True comedy came from shared humanity, from the little mistakes and stumbles everyone experiences. When someone faltered on stage, tripped over a line, or fumbled a joke, the laughter that followed wasn't mean. It was a quiet, knowing acknowledgement of life's imperfections. The audience didn't just watch someone else's misstep. They saw themselves mirrored in that moment, and awkwardness transformed into delight. Carson had a rare gift. He could lean into vulnerability without shame, creating a safe space where performers could turn their own small failures into something beautiful and universally relatable. In his hands, comedy became almost magical, a bridge connecting strangers through laughter, reminding everyone that imperfection isn't something to hide, but something to celebrate. The beauty of these routines was that they combined exaggeration with honesty. Comedians amplified their flaws and misadventures to comic proportions, but the humor never lost its human roots. A ridiculous premise or outrageous scenario might catch the eye, but it was the truth beneath it that touched the heart. Carson's guests could joke about everything from clumsy romantic gestures to humiliating family dinners, from professional failures to awkward social encounters. Every story was a gentle reminder that life is messy and imperfect, and that imperfection is something we all share. Watching these moments unfold, it becomes clear why Johnny Carson's show remains legendary. It wasn't just about the laughs, the applause, or the celebrity guests. It was about connection. Humor became a bridge between the stage and the living room, between the comedian and every person watching at home. Vulnerability, self-deprecation, and honesty turned into a communal celebration of human flaws. In those moments, the audience didn't just hear jokes. They saw themselves reflected in them, and that recognition made the comedy unforgettable. Carson's genius lay in creating a space where laughter wasn't about being better than anyone else. It was about acknowledging that everyone, no matter how polished or famous, stumbles, fails, and sometimes makes choices they regret. Comedy, under Carson's guidance, became a mirror for life itself. And perhaps that's why, decades later, the laughter from his show still echoes, because it celebrated something timeless, something everyone could relate to, the messy, glorious, shared imperfection of being human. How do Johnny Carson's works echo in the homes of his fans? How do fans see his works on stage? Let's delve into the details of Johnny Carson's career that was judged by laughter rather than algorithms. Johnny Carson's stage. Long before likes, shares, and viral trends decided what was funny, comedy had a purer, sharper measure. One man, one moment, one question ruled them all. Could you make Johnny Carson laugh? A single chuckle from him carried more weight than 1,000 roaring crowds. His stage wasn't just a TV set. It was the ultimate test, comedy's highest court. Getting invited was a triumph. Earning his nod was extraordinary, but to make Johnny genuinely laugh, that was something else entirely. It was the kind of magic that turned an ordinary comedian into an immortal legend, forever remembered in the world of laughter. Carson did not announce his power, yet everyone felt it. He didn't shout, dominate, or chase the spotlight. His authority came from stillness, timing, and trust. When Johnny leaned back, smiled, or covered his mouth to laugh, it sent a clear message to the world. This one is special. For comedians watching from home, that reaction could change everything overnight. One laugh could turn an unknown performer into a household name. One nod could open doors that had been locked for years. What made Johnny Carson different was his deep understanding of comedy itself. He knew that humor needs room to breathe. He didn't rush guests or steal their punchlines. Instead, he listened. He let pauses sit. He allowed awkwardness to linger just long enough to turn into gold. Sometimes he gently guided a conversation with a short comment or a raised eyebrow. Other times, he completely stepped aside and let the madness unfold on its own. That balance, knowing when to lead and when to disappear, was his quiet genius. Because of this, The Tonight Show became more than a late-night program. It became a proving ground, a sacred space where comedians were tested in front of a national audience. This was not just entertainment, it was a cultural ritual. Families stayed up late not just to laugh, but to witness moments that would be talked about for decades. Something important always felt possible on that stage, as if history could happen at any second. For comedians, sitting on Carson's couch was unlike any other experience. It wasn't just about telling jokes, it was about showing who you really were. Your timing, your confidence, your voice, your style, everything was exposed under those bright studio lights. There was nowhere to hide, and yet there was also nowhere better to shine. Many comedians didn't just perform there. They discovered themselves there. Careers were born in those moments. Comic identities were shaped. A single appearance could define an entire future. Johnny Carson was not trying to create legends, but legends seemed to appear around him anyway. He treated comedy with respect, and comedians felt it. He didn't mock their efforts or reduce them to quick laughs. He honored the craft. That respect made performers braver. It allowed them to take risks, to try new material, to be bold in ways they couldn't be anywhere else. What's most remarkable is that Johnny never acted like a king, even though everyone treated him like one. He didn't demand loyalty or applause. He simply showed up, night after night, calm and steady, creating a space where comedy could grow naturally. And because of that, his show became a bridge between generations, a place where the past, present, and future of comedy met. Johnny Carson wasn't just hosting comedians. He was watching history form in real time. He was bearing witness to moments that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. In an era before algorithms decided what mattered, Johnny Carson's laughter was the algorithm, and it never got it wrong. What makes Johnny Carson different from other comedians? What is the special ingredient of his work? Let's dig into the details of storytellers, insurers, and improvised storms that sustained the audience's attention. When timing met madness. Comedy at its best is more than just jokes. It's an art, a science, and sometimes even a kind of magic. Some comedians approached it as if they were architects. Buddy Hackett, for example, didn't just tell stories. He built them brick by brick, carefully placing each word, each pause, each gesture, so the audience's anticipation grew with every line. There was a rhythm to his work, a quiet tension that simmered under the surface, stretching just long enough until the laughter finally erupted, unstoppable and cathartic. His legendary duck story wasn't merely a funny anecdote, it was a masterclass in pacing, timing, and release, showing that a great joke is never about the punchline alone, but the journey that leads to it. Hackett understood that comedy, like architecture, needed a solid foundation, careful construction, and precise execution to resonate truly. Then, there were the comedians who thrived on confrontation, turning challenge into performance. Don Rickles, the legendary insult comic, didn't just make fun of people. He commanded the room with daring confidence, transforming barbed jokes into an art form. He could mock anyone, even icons like Frank Sinatra, without hesitation. But his power wasn't in cruelty. It was in his presence, in the way he made the audience feel safe enough to watch danger unfold. There was trust in his audacity. People laughed not just because they were being entertained, but because they sensed the thrilling risk behind every insult. Rickles taught the world that comedy could be sharp, edgy, and even fearless, yet still deeply human. His performances were a delicate dance of tension and release, showing that humor and boldness could coexist beautifully on a stage. And then, there were the true forces of nature, Jonathan Winters and Robin Williams. Unlike Hackett or Rickles, they didn't follow scripts or pacing charts. They defied structure entirely. On stage, they were hurricanes of energy, shifting effortlessly from one character to another, bouncing between voices, ideas, and emotions faster than anyone could anticipate. Improvisation was their playground. Spontaneity was their signature. They didn't just tell jokes, they created entire worlds in moments, turning a simple stage into a kaleidoscope of characters, scenarios, and absurdities. For them, comedy wasn't a plan, it was instinct, intuition, and unbridled joy. Johnny Carson, the host who shared the stage with them, didn't try to contain their chaos. He surrendered to it, allowing their wild brilliance to flow freely, and in doing so, he helped produce some of the most unforgettable moments in television history. Watching them was like witnessing lightning strike, impossible to predict, impossible to ignore. What made all these comedians extraordinary wasn't just talent. It was their understanding of the human experience. They knew how to build tension, how to challenge the audience, and how to let go of control in ways that made people feel something beyond laughter: anticipation, surprise, awe, and even relief. Each had their own style, yet all shared one truth: the best comedy doesn't just hit the funny bone. It touches something deeper, something universal. Hackett reminded us that patience and timing are magical. Rickles showed that boldness and confidence can excite the heart. Winters and Williams proved that energy, spontaneity, and fearlessness can transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. In every laugh, in every pause, in every unexpected twist of words or movement, these comedians left a mark that went far beyond mere jokes. They built worlds, they challenged norms, and they shattered expectations. Their legacy isn't just in the punchlines we remember. It's in the artistry, the daring, and the sheer humanity that made audiences everywhere fall in love with comedy all over again. In watching them, we don't just see laughter. We witness the brilliance of creativity unleashed and the unforgettable power of performers who understood that comedy, at its peak, is a force that can move hearts as much as it moves sides. Did Johnny Carson groom legends as newcomers? How did he prepare the stage for upcoming comedians? Let's take a look at how Johnny Carson's stage became unstoppable for newcomers. The birth of legends. Johnny Carson's stage wasn't just a platform for already famous comedians, it was a launching pad, a proving ground, and a place where raw talent could roar into the world. It was where stars weren't simply introduced. They were born, forged in front of millions of viewers, under the unforgiving glare of cameras, lights, and expectations. To step onto that stage was to step into a crucible where confidence, timing, and sheer daring were tested all at once. Take Eddie Murphy, for instance. The young comedian didn't shuffle nervously or tiptoe around the audience. He walked out like a man who had already glimpsed his destiny, who already knew he belonged in the bright, unforgiving spotlight. Every gesture, every glance, every word was packed with the certainty of someone who had visions of greatness burning in his mind. It wasn't arrogance. It was an unshakable belief in his own talent. The room felt it instantly. The tension, the electricity, the sense that something monumental was about to happen. Then there was Jim Carrey, whose debut was something extraordinary. For Carrey, performing on Carson's stage wasn't just another set. It was the culmination of everything he had ever worked for. Every muscle, every facial expression, every ounce of his body and soul was thrown into his performance. It was as if this single moment carried the weight of his entire life, as if failure was impossible because he had committed so fully to success. Watching him was like watching a human being explode with energy, creativity, and sheer audacity all at once. The audience didn't just laugh, they gasped, they were shocked, they were mesmerized. These weren't neat, rehearsed performances polished to perfection. They weren't safe or careful, they were dangerous, thrilling, and alive. The risk itself made them beautiful. Johnny Carson, a man who had seen decades of comedy pass across his stage, could feel it immediately when something special happened. It wasn't just about the laughs, it was about a shift, a crackling in the air, a sense that this wasn't just another funny man telling jokes. It was someone who could redefine what comedy could be. Even comedians who weren't formally invited to join him on the famous couch left the stage, and the audience, transformed. There was a kind of magic that happened in that brief, unpredictable window of performance. Carson himself once admitted that when he first saw Jim Carrey, he didn't know what to call it. It wasn't something he could label. It was something bigger, something electric, something that mattered. And that's the thing about true talent. It can't be contained by categories, rules, or expectations. It announces itself, whether anyone is ready or not. Watching these performers, you realized greatness doesn't always arrive quietly or politely. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't announce itself with humility or subtlety. Sometimes it bursts into the world awkwardly, loudly, in ways that make people stop and take notice. It shakes the air, shifts the room, and leaves everyone it touches, audience, hosts, and fellow performers alike, changed in ways they didn't expect. Carson's stage was a crucible of courage and creativity, a place where the unpredictable could happen. It was a place where young comedians dared to risk everything, knowing that if they gave their absolute all, something unforgettable could happen. And often, it did. Eddie Murphy, Jim Carrey, and countless others stepped into that light and left not just jokes behind, but pieces of themselves, raw and blazing, for the world to see. It was messy. It was daring. It was magnificent. And it reminded everyone watching that true greatness is rarely subtle. It arrives roaring, with energy, awkwardness, and brilliance that cannot be ignored. Despite Johnny Carson's exit from this world 2 decades ago, moments of his show still resonate. How is this so? What exactly helped him sustain that memory long after his demise? Let's find out the reasons why the moments still echo. Comedy as memory, courage, and art. What makes those legendary moments on The Tonight Show still resonate today goes far beyond nostalgia. It is not simply that we remember them fondly or smile at the past. What truly keeps them alive is courage, the kind of daring that only a few performers can summon. Each comedian who stepped onto that stage risked something enormous, the possibility of complete failure in front of millions of eyes all at once. They didn't just tell jokes, they trusted themselves, their instincts, and most importantly, the intelligence of the audience watching from their living rooms. There was a gamble in every pause, every look, every misstep that somehow became a moment of magic. Take Steve Martin, for instance. His genius often spoke without a single word. He could freeze a scene with silence, stretch the limits of absurdity, and still make the audience erupt in laughter. Then there was Andy Kaufman, whose performances blurred the line between reality and imagination. He would transform himself in ways no one expected, sometimes unsettling, often hilarious, always unforgettable. Stephen Wright brought a completely different energy, a quiet, deadpan philosophy that made the ordinary feel bizarrely profound. And who could forget Tim Conway, whose slow, deliberate destruction of Carol Burnett's carefully maintained composure became a masterclass in timing, patience, and chaos. These weren't just funny skits. They were bold experiments, proofs that comedy could be inventive, fearless, and artful all at once. Johnny Carson, the master host, understood something essential and timeless about comedy. It is never merely noise or mindless laughter. True comedy speaks to a deeper truth, delivered at an angle, sometimes sideways, so that the audience recognizes it in an instant. It challenges, surprises, and delights, all at the same time. That is why, decades later, comedians, young and seasoned alike, still study these clips. Not to steal lines or mimic routines, but to understand the bravery behind them. They study the confidence, the timing, the courage to try something risky on the world's stage and to trust that the audience will follow along. What these nights created was more than laughter. They were opportunities for pure creativity to flourish. They were nights when rules could be bent, expectations could be upended, and imagination could roam free. Every punchline, every awkward pause, every shocking twist was a reminder that comedy is not only about telling jokes, it is about connecting with people, challenging the ordinary, and finding joy in unexpected places. Each performance carried a spark of audacity, a willingness to step into the unknown, and a belief that the audience could see the beauty in risk. Looking back now, it is clear that these moments were not just television episodes. They were cultural landmarks. They set standards, shaped styles, and inspired generations. They remind us that the magic of comedy lies not in repetition or imitation, but in courage, creativity, and honesty. When Steve Martin, Andy Kaufman, Stephen Wright, or Tim Conway stepped onto the stage, they were doing more than making people laugh. They were showing the world what comedy could become when fear is replaced with boldness, and imagination is given free rein. In the end, the enduring power of The Tonight Show lies in its ability to capture not just humor, but human daring. It is a reminder that the best laughter often comes from the bravest hearts. And when we watch those clips today, we are not just remembering funny nights on television. We are witnessing history daring to be playful, audacious, and alive. And we are laughing along even decades later. So what do you think about Johnny's joke that shook the entire nation? Would he be sanctioned if it were to happen today? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.